everybody up to our kitchen, which had this view of and within a half hour, there were probably 40 people in my kitchen, and the rest of the island, the tom-toms were pounding that the store was on fire, and people just started showing up. All the volunteer department came. At that point, there were several student firefighters that all showed up. They actually fought all night long. There's a little article thing that we had at the beginning that you can read that's actually pretty accurate information about the fire. Rita Schultz was the 6th grade teacher, and her husband Larry was the fire chief at the time. And so Rita had her class do these interviews and so forth and write this newspaper article about the fire. And it talks about the student firefighters that were there. The thing that was amazing to me was the sense of community, because like I said, as word spread, people just showed up out of the woodworks, and there were hundreds of people. You looked up on Vista Road, and it was solid cars and solid people just lined up to watch. And anyone that got through the fire line was in my kitchen. And so, but I remember it was like 10 o'clock, and like I said, the store is just burning, explosions happening. That's the other thing I remember so well, was stuff exploding, because there were so many things under pressure, and ammunition and paint cans and you name it in that store. But Bill Carpenter called and said, bring a couple cars, I'm opening the store up, you can take any supplies you want to feed the fire crews. So a couple of the wives of different firefighters went down, and Bill gave us anything we wanted, and then we set up doing soup and sandwiches and coffee and hot chocolate, because it was October, it was cold, and this wind was blowing, and so those guys were there all night long. They stayed all that next day. And then for the next 2 nights, the neighbors, we all did fire watch down there, just because there was so much stuff smoldering. The other thing you don't think about, but all of the, once the store kind of collapsed and the dock kind of collapsed, everything was in the water. So the safe from the store was in the water, just within a couple feet of water. Canned goods, everything imaginable was just all over in that bay. For 6 months after that, we had stuff wash up on the beach that would be burned, and it was from the fire. So there was just a lot of debris every place. But the sense of community was really something. You knew there was big news, probably also within 45 minutes of that fire starting. I pick up my phone, and it's Cairo News saying they wanted to land their helicopter in the field. And I'm like, you need to call someone else, not me. But then King 5 showed up, and all these news people showed up, and they had pictures on the 11 o'clock news. The fire didn't start until close to 9, but it was big news in Seattle, because so many people had memories of that store, and so many years, so many generations. And so it was an interesting lesson in just watching the community respond to something, and I think it brought all of us closer down in that community, down in that area. We had been tight neighbors, but I think we were even tighter, and we kind of stayed with Ken and Sue. Just as a follow-up, Ken and Sue, because they were the owners, the way the insurance worked, they could try to rebuild the store, but it was grandfathered in to be built on the water, out on the piers the way it had been. And so they had to be the ones to rebuild it, and they had to rebuild it exactly as it had been, which wasn't ideal. But they started the process, and within I forget how many agencies, but Ken would come over and say, you know, we've talked to 5 and now they told us there's 10 more agencies we have to go through to get permits to do this. They finally gave up after 2 years and gave up the rights to rebuilding the store, and at that time they were ready to retire anyway and decided to leave the island, and so they ended up selling the gas business and the docks to Rex and Don Ritchie, who still own it to this day, I think. So so that was kind of what happened afterwards, but Ken and Sue did do an attempt, but it just didn't work. But those student firefighters were great during the fire. It was interesting that several of them that were there during that time, they went on and became firemen in their real lives. And it's Matt and Scott Cowan and Jason Leedy and Crockett Blanchard, and there's a whole group of them that were listed. But I think it was a huge experience for all of them because they had never been involved in anything like that. But it was a huge fire. So, yeah.
It's definitely on.
I was gonna say, the only thing I was gonna say is, I was amazed at how those firemen stood under those tanks and kept them cool so they wouldn't blow, and the tanks were just perfect because every one of them, or the gas ones, caught on fire on top and it was released, letting the pressure off just the way it was supposed to. But Mary and I and the kids, we went up the hill. Or to my folks where they built a new place on the hill, because we didn't want to be close down there, because we didn't know what happened if the tanks blew up. But we watched those kids through binoculars and firefighters. Just, I was amazed. I would have been scared to death to do what they were doing, standing under those full fuel tanks and just keeping cold water going on.
Yeah, they were the smart ones because, like I said, there was a lot of people in my house and all the fire guys. And the next day when the fire marshal came, he came to the house because they said they met there actually at our house. And he said, so where was your evacuation line? And I remember, you know, Larry looking at him and kind of looking around and said, well, here, we got people back to here. And the fire marshal just had a fit, and he said, if those tanks would have blown, he said every window in any house would have blown out within a mile of here. And he said that the minimum should have been Vista Road and Paradise Road rather than ours. So, yeah, we were lucky that night, but the vents did work the way they were supposed to.
Well, anybody else on the panel have anything they want to add now? Mary?
Am I on?
Yes,
I
you are.
am. So one of the things that I felt was important after the fire is it was a historical building. And I know Ken and Sue would have liked to have been able to rebuild, but as we all know, you can't rebuild history. And that is what Richardson is about history. And that's what we're listening to tonight, is what happens when a store or a historical building is destroyed. You lose that history. But we have been able to tell you a few things about it leading up to it. Both of my daughters remember the store very well, and my daughter Amy worked at Richardson. She thinks it was around 1987. And some of the things Rachel remembers, she was younger, and she remembers Holly's Bakery being there. And she would watch cars go down, and then she'd go down and help some of the older ladies carry the groceries to the car. She always got a little tip of some penny candy or something, so it wasn't all you know, she knew she'd get something out of the deal. And then she'd bring home any stray cat she found in the ditch, too. But it was a big part of my kids' life because we were just within walking distance. And Amy was at Western University in Bellingham at the time. And it really broke her heart to see part of her family history go up in smoke in less than an hour. It was the most dramatic fire I've ever seen. And I don't have anything else, or is there any questions from the audience?
Yeah, does anybody have any comments you'd like to make? And if you do would like to make a comment, we have a microphone set up here, so you can come on up and talk. Or if you
We turn
just
the
want to
lights
stand
on?
up. And
Turn the lights on?
That's the last slide. Here's some more.
Before.
Okay, someone here had their hand up, yeah.
So, my name is Paul Hendrickson, and I moved here in '78, and I just want to say quickly, I used to go to Richardson and get plumbing supplies and hardware and ammunition and groceries and whatever, and the thing I remember most about it was Mr. Scripps was very fond of fireworks, and he would let off fireworks, and the whole island would come to Richardson on the 4th of July to see fireworks, and that was quite a bit of fun. I also remember the night that it burned, and I don't want to talk about that because it was quite sad. But what I want to mention is I'm on the Port Commission, and this is kind of serendipitous, very coincidental. The port has been trying to see if we can preserve Richardson and save it as public land, possibly a park. And I sent out a proposal to a bunch of agencies in the county and statewide, saying that if different agencies participated and bought this, we could save Richardson. And like Mary said, the store is gone, but the property's still there. The assessed value is about $560,000. So if we had a number of agencies get together, and the port could kick in 25%, maybe other agencies could. And I'm just mentioning that tonight because there's so many people interested in the property. Perhaps we could try to preserve this for the public, and people could go down there in perpetuity and just see the wonderful wildlife and just experience that place. And so I'm going to stay here at the end and help put away chairs. If you're interested at all, you can talk to me. My contact information is also on the port website. So thanks for listening, and I'm hoping that we could save this property.
The Scripps family should be,
Anybody else have a story they'd like to share with us? There's got a hand up in the back?
I got one here.
Okay.
Like most of you here, I was a customer.
Around here.
One. I'll jump up and never come down. I'm a customer in 1968 and 69. Was a camper at Henderson Camps. We used to come and have ice cream. I'm sure all of you had a great ice cream cone at Richardson's. And I have a moose story. I'm glad you told everything about moose, but I anyway, late 60s, I go in and I want to have a T-bone steak cut, and Oliver's there, and the beautiful butcher block. I love the store because it did have all that old stuff in it, and the patina of the place was beautiful. And the chopping block, of course, was kind of been whacked on a long time. Well, Moose was, I was talking to Oliver, and he says, "Oh, what do you want?" "Oh, I like a T-bone, inch and a half, whatever." And he says, "Okay," and he gets the quarter out, whatever he has. And all of a sudden, Moose appears, lays his head on the chopping block. And if you remember Moose, he was a moose. So a T-bone, when it's in its raw state, not all fixed up like we get it, has a kind of a tail of fat on the end. Oliver takes the lever, whacks that piece off. Moose opens his mouth and he goes, whoop, and it goes, whoop. He didn't even chew it up there. That's Moose's story.
Anyone else? Fine.
How is it that the man sold in only 1 year?
I couldn't really tell you the reason for that. Maybe they just didn't feel like they were suited to be storekeepers.
I don't know, Ron, nobody said anything about this. When Ron May, who had started IMC, started his, after going to Evinrude School, he started his repair business in the basement of Richardson Store.
Was he still there when the Chandlers were there? Yes.
Yeah.
Ron stayed on, he opened his shop.
And so then they moved down there, and I think his dad helped him some, so I don't know, maybe that was the reason, we don't know, but I was gonna say one thing. People, they were saying about people from Seattle, 15 years after the store had burned, we still have people stopping at our place and asking us where Richardson Store was.
Upgrade the maps.
I thought I saw a hand down over that way. Is it still someone over there? Yeah.
I started volunteering, my name's Nancy McCoy, and I started volunteering at the museum in the late 70s. And one of my early mentors was Gertrude Hodson Lovejoy Bodie, who was the daughter of the early storekeeper. And she used to share stories about being at the store when she was a child. And one of my favorites was she told how one night there used to be regular excursion tourist boats and steamers that traveled from the mainland to Victoria that would pass by the south end of Lopez. One night, one of the excursion boats came a little close and went on the rocks at Davidson Reef by Point Coville. So they offloaded all the passengers from the boat and brought them to Richardson. And as a little girl, what she remembered of that whole plight of all these people being rescued and brought to the store was they bought up all the candy. So as the storekeeper's daughter, I think she was used to helping herself. And there wasn't any candy left that next morning after the boat went on the rocks. Also, I was involved in nominating the store to the National Register. It was one of the few properties beside the Fort Stanley School that was successfully listed on the National Register. And I worked with Bob Patton, who is an architect from Orcus, on doing this. And back then, we didn't have drones to take photographs of the building, and we were required to take photographs from each side of the building. So I remember having to wrangle a ride on somebody's boat so that we could take a photograph from the water side. And then also just looking at these historic photos that we've seen tonight to try to figure out the evolution of the building, how it developed from warehouse down on the dock and the store up on the hill, and how the storekeepers got kind of tired of running back and forth, so that's when the Lundys combined and disassembled the store on the hill and combined it with the warehouse down below. But it was quite fun, just sort of piecing together the history and the evolution of the store for that National Register nomination.
When we were putting this together, we discovered there's a lot of great photos. By the way, stop in at the museum. Amy's there a lot of the time. We have a whole book of photographs. I mean, we're just literally seeing a small portion of the information. We have a great amount of stuff, but we didn't really have it organized quite chronologically. So as we began to go in and start to put this together, we've got a better timeline now than we had before. So you can kind of see the growth and the progression of what was going on, because we kind of had to have it for this. So that will help you out. And there's probably many of you have a lot of family information there. There's old newspaper articles, there are little photographs. You might be able to help us identify people in some of these photographs that we don't know. So take some time, stop down there and check it out. You know, she doesn't always have a car. She rides a bicycle a lot of the time, so you might want to peek around and see if there's a bike by the door if you don't see a car. But do stop in, because I know she wants to see everybody, and she's doing a great job. Anybody else have a comment or wants to just?
What's the brown building on the shore down there in the gulch there, right next to Richardson? Not in the picture, in real life, it's still standing. I heard it was a community center.
Yeah, go ahead. Becky can speak to that.
That was actually part of our property, and that building was actually served as a warehouse, a temporary warehouse, I think, at one point, from what we were told. But it was a community building in that Richardson area, and it actually, you could see remnants inside. It had been a movie theater at one point, and you could see they had built this fake floor platform up high that somebody climbed up there and ran a movie projector up there. And it had been a meeting hall, and it had been a meat packing, some sort of meat storage, and all kinds of community uses.
Dances, I heard.
Yeah, Cliff Lowry ran a meat shop out of there.
Okay, but tell them what it really was. It was a place where you and I played basketball.
Yes, we did.
That's
Actually, I played basketball there. Basketball playing there goes back, I don't know how long.
Our kids played basketball.
But probably 3 or 4 generations of kids have played basketball.
But the Grange also had, I don't know whether they had any meetings there, the old, but the Grange had a grain cleaner in there for a while. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it was with electric motor and to clean grain with.
And the basketball tradition went on when we had it, except my kids added a trampoline to the basket, and Shane, Patrick, and Seth learned their basketball skills in that part by jumping on the trampoline and making basketball.